A quiet day takes a dramatic turn when a routine encounter spirals out of control. A young black woman in a wheelchair, visibly pregnant, is stopped by a police officer outside a busy shopping plaza. What starts as a simple exchange quickly escalates, leaving bystanders stunned. The officer, convinced she matches the description of a suspect, disregards her explanations and insists on taking her into custody. Unbeknownst to him, her husband, a high-ranking FBI agent, is just minutes away from the scene. As tensions rise, questions of bias, accountability, and human decency come to the forefront. Was this a case of mistaken identity or something more troubling? And how will the officer react when the truth comes to light? Stay tuned, as this story dives into the complex layers of justice, identity, and the unexpected twists that bring it all together. As the officer tightens the handcuffs around her wrists, the woman pleads her case, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. She explains that she was just running errands and insists they've got the wrong person. But the officer, focused on procedure, brushes off her words, convinced he's doing his job. Bystanders begin to gather, some recording the scene on their phones, while others whisper among themselves, unsure of what to do. What the officer doesn't know is that the woman had been texting her husband moments before the stop, letting him know where she was. When she doesn't respond to his follow-up messages, he grows concerned. Checking her location through an app, he notices she hasn't moved for several minutes. Something feels off. He grabs his badge and car keys, racing toward the GPS pin. Meanwhile, the crowd around the scene grows, the air thick with tension. As the officer leads the woman toward the patrol car, she winces, struggling to move in her wheelchair while restrained. A few bystanders step closer, some voicing their concerns, but the officer waves them off, insisting it's an official matter. The woman, exhausted and overwhelmed, quietly says, "You don't know who you're dealing with." Her words hang in the air, but the officer pays no attention, assuming it's an empty threat. Meanwhile, her husband speeds through traffic, his mind racing. Years of FBI training have taught him to stay calm under pressure, but this feels personal. He replays their last conversation in his head, wondering what could have gone wrong. Back at the scene, a store employee approaches the officer, cautiously explaining that he's mistaken. This woman isn't the person he's looking for. The officer hesitates for a moment, but decides to ignore the input, doubling down on his authority. The situation is on the verge of boiling over. The officer places the woman into the back of the patrol car, her wheelchair folded and awkwardly shoved into the trunk. Tears streak her face as she whispers under her breath, "He's coming for me." Her words, barely audible, carry a weight that even she doesn't fully realize. The crowd's frustration grows, with murmurs turning into questions directed at the officer, but he's too focused on securing the scene to pay attention. Just as the patrol car begins to pull away, a black SUV screeches to a stop nearby. The woman's husband steps out, his sharp suit and FBI badge catching the attention of everyone around. His eyes lock on his wife, and for a split second, his professional demeanor falters, replaced by sheer determination. He approaches the officer with measured steps, identifying himself and demanding an explanation. The officer, caught off guard, hesitates but doesn't release the woman, setting the stage for a tense confrontation. The officer stiffens at the sight of the FBI badge, but instead of backing down, he doubles down on his authority, insisting he's following protocol. The woman's husband keeps his tone calm, though his voice carries an unmistakable edge. "That's my wife in your car," he says firmly, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The officer hesitates, his confidence faltering for a moment, but before he can respond, his radio crackles to life. A voice comes through, informing him that the actual suspect has just been apprehended across town. The tension shifts as the officer realizes his mistake, but instead of admitting it, he tries to deflect, claiming he was just being thorough. The husband, now visibly furious, steps closer. "Thorough," he says, his voice rising. "You've terrified a pregnant woman and ignored every attempt to correct you. The crowd watches in stunned silence, sensing that the situation is far from over. The officer begrudgingly opens the patrol car, helping the woman out as her husband rushes to her side. She clings to him, her tears now a mix of relief and frustration. The officer mutters a quick apology, but it's clear he's trying to save face. The crowd murmurs, their phones still recording, as the tension begins to ease. The husband looks the officer in the eye and says, "This isn't over. I'll see to it that you're held accountable." Just as the woman's wheelchair is being unfolded, another police car pulls up, and a senior officer steps out, looking grim. He walks over to the scene, quickly assessing the situation. "We need to talk," he says firmly, pulling the officer aside. Moments later, the senior officer approaches the husband, apologizing for what happened. But as he's about to walk away, the woman, now seated in her wheelchair, quietly says, "Check his trunk." The senior officer looks confused but orders it anyway. When the trunk is opened, everyone freezes. Inside are several unmarked items tied to ongoing cases, a shocking discovery that flips the script entirely. The officer's face goes pale as he stammers, realizing the tables have turned in a way he never expected. The husband, now calm but resolute, simply says, "Looks like you've got some explaining to do." The crowd watched in stunned silence as the officer was taken aside, now under investigation himself. The senior officer ordered a full review of the situation, and the woman's husband assured his wife that justice would be served. The tension began to ease as the couple embraced, their bond unshaken despite the chaos. The officer, once so sure of his authority, was led away for questioning, his confidence replaced by visible fear. The husband thanked the bystanders who had spoken up and documented the incident, knowing their efforts had helped shine a light on what could have gone unnoticed. As they left the scene, the woman looked at her husband and said softly, "I told him you'd come for me." He smiled, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. For the couple, this ordeal was more than a close call. It was a reminder of the power of resilience and accountability in the face of injustice.